15 years of marriage. 13 of believing he was a father. All of it nothing but suffocating lies. His phone buzzed. Dean Maroro, his so-called friend and business partner. "Hey, buddy. Wine fridges acting up again. Mind stopping by tonight? Kara mentioned you're free?" Rick stared at the text. Dean's house. The same house where Kara had been hosting book club every Tuesday. The same Dean who'd offered Rick parts at cost to help him grow his shop. Slowly, Rick typed back, "On my way." The drive to Dean's sprawling mansion took 12 minutes through neatly trimmed streets hiding neatly packaged secrets. Rick pulled into the driveway, his beat-up service truck looking diseased next to Dean's gleaming BMW and Mercedes. Dean opened the door in a silk robe, hair damp from a shower. "Rick, appreciate you coming so late, man. Wine fridges dead cold. Got some pricey bottles in there." "No problem," Rick muttered, hoisting his toolbox. "Lead the way." The air inside reeked of expensive cologne and fresh intimacy. Rick followed Dean down marble halls lined with art worth more than Rick's annual income. They stepped into a lavish basement, leather chairs, crystal decanters, and a dead wine fridge growling in the corner. "Started acting up yesterday," Dean explained, pouring himself scotch. "Gave out completely this morning." Rick crouched by the unit, his hands moving by muscle memory while his brain spun darker thoughts. Loose compressor belt. 15 minutes, tops. Dean sipped his drink. "How's Kara doing? She seemed wound up last time she was here." Rick's wrench slipped, almost taking skin with it. "When was that?" "Tuesday night. Book club. Though honestly, I think they drink more wine than red." Dean chuckled. "Not that I mind. Kara's great company." The belt snapped back into place with a sharp click. Rick dusted his knees and forced a smile. "Mind if I use your bathroom?" "Master upstairs. Best water pressure," Dean said. Rick climbed slowly, every step like walking toward execution. The master bedroom oozed excess, a California king draped in black silk, a closet larger than Rick's garage, and a bathroom fit for royalty. He splashed cold water on his face, staring at the grease-stained hands and gray hairs reflected back. What had he expected? That a woman like Kara would be satisfied forever with a man like him? Reaching for a towel, he froze. Tucked behind beauty products sat a Polaroid. His heart seized. Kara, his wife, naked except for black lingerie he'd never seen, sprawled across the very vanity where he now stood. Her wedding ring gleamed as her hand teased herself, eyes blazing with a hunger Rick hadn't witnessed in years. At the bottom, in Kara's handwriting, "For my real man." The photo shook in his hand before he slipped it into his pocket. He returned downstairs on leaden legs. Dean, relaxed with his scotch, looked up. "All fixed," Rick said, his own voice sounding foreign. Compressor belt was loose. "Should run fine now." "You're a lifesaver." Dean reached for his wallet. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Friends help friends." Dean grinned, extending his hand. Rick shook it, noting the softness of palms that had never known sweat, scars, or sacrifice. "Kara's lucky to have a guy like you," Dean said. "Dependable, steady. Salt of the earth." "Yeah," Rick replied flatly. "I know exactly what I am." The drive home felt dreamlike. His modest two-story looked shrunken compared to Dean's palace. Kara's car was absent, still at book club or Dean's bed. Rick sat in his truck 20 long minutes, staring at the house where he thought he was building a family. The Polaroid burned against his chest like acid. His phone rang. Kara's voice. "Hey, honey, book club's running late. Don't wait up, okay? Love you." "Love you too," Rick said, the words jagged in his mouth. The boys were already asleep when he went inside. He lingered at their doorway, watching Tommy and Jake under superhero blankets. 11 and 8. Dean's blood, not his. But they didn't know. They still called him Dad. Ran into his arms. Asked for homework help and bike repairs. That love was real, even if DNA wasn't. Rick pulled the test results once more before feeding them into the shredder. The machine ate his humiliation with mechanical efficiency. But the Polaroid? That he kept. Evidence for later. Kara came home at 2:17 a.m., sliding into bed like a phantom. She smelled of luxury soap and a man's cologne Rick didn't recognize. He kept his eyes shut, listening to her calm, guilty-free breathing. Morning chaos unfolded as usual: breakfast, backpacks, the boys bickering. Kara kissed him goodbye, her lips still tainted by someone else. "Have a good day, love you." "Love you too," he replied hollow. When the house emptied, Rick sat at the kitchen table. Revenge wasn't a dish served cold. It was a machine, requiring careful design. One wrong move, and it could blow up in his face. First, he needed proof. More than a Polaroid. That morning he installed a hidden voice recorder on Kara's laptop, buried deep in system files. Then he cloned her phone, rerouting every text and call to a burner he bought in cash. By afternoon, the full scope of betrayal was clear. 8 months of messages, explicit photos, phone sex while Rick worked in the garage, and money transfers from their joint account straight into Dean's business. But the cruelest discovery was a folder labeled Future Plans. Inside, divorce papers and custody agreements granting Kara full rights to the boys. Rick ordered to pay maximum child support for children who weren't even his. It hadn't been passion. It was strategy. Rick printed every file, every picture, every text. He sorted them into neat manila folders like a prosecutor assembling a case, because that's exactly what he was doing. The next 3 weeks tested him more than anything before. Smiling, pretending, keeping the illusion alive while secretly documenting every lie, every insult, every act of betrayal. Kara only grew bolder, later nights, sharper words, and a disdain she barely tried to hide anymore. "Maybe you should expand the business," she said one evening over dinner. "Dean says commercial refrigeration's where the money is. Big contracts." "Dean says a lot," Rick answered carefully. "He's trying to help you, Rick. God knows you need it. We can't live like this forever." The boys glanced between their parents, sensing tension they couldn't name. Tommy, the older one, reached out and touched Rick's hand. "Dad, you okay?" Rick forced a tired smile. "Just work stuff, buddy." That night, Rick lay awake listening to Kara's voice crackle through his hidden recorder. "He's so pathetic. Just sits there like a beaten dog. I almost pity him." Dean's voice replied, smug and certain. "Not much longer. Once the divorce is finalized, you'll be free. We both will. What about the boys? What about them? Rick will pay support. They'll finally have a real father figure. Everybody wins." Rick shut off the recording, staring at the ceiling until morning. By month's end, his chance arrived. Dean's warehouse had just taken delivery of nearly $500,000 worth of refrigeration units. Friday night, when the place would be deserted, Rick moved in. He parked 6 blocks away, gym bag of tools slung over his shoulder, and cut through the fence at the loading dock. Years of emergency service work had taught him how to bypass security systems more advanced than this. Cameras and motion sensors weren't protection, they were toys. Inside was a labyrinth of stacked units and parts. Rick moved silently, planting his devices with the precision of an engineer. Not bombs. Nothing lethal. Something far more devastating. Ammonia-based refrigerant, set to seep from punctured lines all weekend until, by Monday morning, the warehouse would reek of toxic chemicals. The health department would have no choice but to shut it down. Dean's massive contract gone. His reputation ruined. Rick wasn't done. He tucked packets of marijuana into key locations. Not much, just enough for police to file charges when they inevitably searched the site. And the final stroke: Dean's office computer. Rick installed a virus designed to rot the hard drive while simultaneously uploading financial data to an anonymous IRS tip line. By 3 a.m., Rick was back in bed, listening to Kara's peaceful snore. She had no idea her world was collapsing. The first domino fell Saturday morning. Rick's phone rang at 8. "Rick, thank God." Dean's voice cracked with panic. Something's wrong at the warehouse. Smells like chemicals. You know refrigerant systems. Any idea what's going on? Rick rubbed his eyes, feigning grogginess. Chemical leak? Sounds dangerous. You should call hazmat. I can't. A shutdown will ruin me. I've got a huge delivery Monday. Please, just take a look. Sorry, buddy. That's out of my league. Call the fire department. Rick ended the call and sipped his coffee with a thin smile. By Monday, local news carried headlines about the contamination at Maroro Distribution. Contracts canceled. Insurance investigations launched. The IRS alerted to unreported income. But Rick wasn't finished. Tuesday, Phase 2 hit Kara. Her leased BMW, already straining their budget, broke down in her office lot. The custom refrigeration unit in the trunk, used for keeping champagne chilled for clients, mysteriously exploded during a presentation. No one was injured, but Kara's pitch to a major client was ruined. Investigators quickly determined the unit had been deliberately tampered with. Insurance fraud specialists began digging into her finances. Rick watched the coverage from his garage, surrounded by the tools of his trade. Every wrench, every gauge, every part had become an instrument in his war. By Wednesday, Dean called again. Rick, I need to ask you something, and be straight with me. Have you been in my warehouse? Your warehouse? Why would I go there? Because someone sabotaged it. Professional work. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. You think I torched your business? Rick let the silence stretch. I don't know what to think anymore. The tax guys are breathing down my neck. Insurance won't pay. Kara's car is wrecked. It's like someone's targeting us both. Maybe, Rick said quietly, you should take a closer look at your choices. Consequences have a way of catching up. The line went dead. Thursday evening. An unexpected knock. Kara's sister Michelle stood at his door, uneasy but determined. She stepped inside, clutching a manila envelope. Kara asked me to give you these, she said, sliding divorce papers onto the coffee table. She's at a hotel until you move out. Rick glanced at them without touching. Just like that. Rick, everyone knows this marriage has been over. Kara deserves happiness. The boys deserve stability. Stability. Rick's laugh was jagged, like grinding steel. Funny word to use about Kara. Look, I know you're angry, but dragging this out won't help. Sign the papers. Split things. Figure custody. Be adults. Rick stood, walked to his filing cabinet, and returned with a thick folder. He dropped it on the table beside the divorce papers. Before I sign a damn thing, he said, you need to see who your sister really is. Michelle opened the folder. Her face drained of color as photo after photo, message after message, passed before her eyes. 8 months of betrayal laid out with clinical precision. Then her gaze froze on the Polaroid from Dean's bathroom. Oh my God, she whispered. Rick, I had no idea. Neither did I. Michelle's hands shook as she flipped through texts, bank transfers, recordings. The boys, they're not. Not mine, no. But I've been their father in every way that matters for over a decade. This is insane. Kara wouldn't, she couldn't. Rick tapped his phone. Kara's voice filled the room. Rick's such a fool. He still thinks they're his. Once this is over, he'll be paying support for Dean's kids while I move into that gorgeous house. Perfect, isn't it? Michelle dropped the folder, papers scattering across the floor like shrapnel from a bomb. I need to go, she stammered, standing unsteadily. At the door, Rick's voice stopped her. When you see your sister, tell her I got the message loud and clear. And tell her I'm sending one back. Friday morning, Rick drove to the abandoned ice factory on the edge of town. He'd worked there once, fresh out of high school, before starting his own business. Empty for years, the building's refrigeration system still remained. Giant units capable of chilling city blocks. Rick spent the day transforming it. He wired the cooling system to project sound and images throughout the cavernous space. Cameras set up. Folding chairs unfolded like theater seating. Because this wasn't just preparation, this was a stage. The final act in Rick Dalton's shift from victim to executioner. Saturday afternoon, the invitations went out. From a burner phone, Dean received, Emergency meeting about insurance claim. Ice factory on Industrial Road. Come alone. Big money involved. 30 minutes later, Kara received a different message. Rick's planning something reckless. Meet me at the ice factory. We have to stop him before he ruins everything. Rick arrived early, waiting in the shadows. Dean showed first, his BMW absurdly clean against the crumbling factory walls. He stepped inside, cautious. Hello? Got your message about the insurance thing? Rick emerged from the dark, dressed in spotless work clothes, tools arranged neatly on a nearby table. Hello, Dean. Dean spun, his face shifting from confusion to realization to fear. Rick, what the hell is this? It's about truth, Rick said calmly. Something you and my wife seem allergic to. Look, if this is about Kara, it's about everything. Rick gestured to the massive screens wired across the space. About lies. About betrayal. About consequences. The monitors flickered alive, blasting text messages between Dean and Kara, graphic photos, bank transfers, and the divorce papers already naming Dean as stepfather. Dean's face went pale. Rick, let me explain. Explain what? Rick snapped. How you pretended to be my buddy while sneaking into my wife's bed. How you talked her into draining our joint accounts. How you schemed to snatch my company while I got stuck paying child support for your brats. The boys are mine, Dean blurted, stunned. Rick let out a harsh laugh. You didn't know? My God, Dean, you're even dumber than I thought. Car doors slammed outside. Kara had arrived. She strode into the factory with her chin held high, acting like she owned the place. But the moment her eyes caught the glowing monitors displaying her most intimate betrayals, her confidence cracked like brittle glass. Rick, what is this? This, Rick said flatly, is Judgment Day. Kara glanced between Rick and Dean, sizing up her chances like the calculating predator she had always been.
Fine. You found out.
So what? Our marriage was dead already. I just did what I had to do. What you had to do. Rick's voice finally rose. You had to fake paternity? You had to steal our money while pretending to love me? I never loved you. Kara's mask tore away with her scream. You're dull, small, pathetic. Dean offers me a real life, not this working-class prison. Dean straightened, suddenly bold. Rick, I'm sorry it turned out like this, but Kara's right. She deserves better than what you can give her. Better? Rick grabbed a heavy wrench from the workbench. Better like a man about to be ruined for tax fraud? Better like someone whose warehouse was just shut down for chemical contamination? Better like the guy who let me raise his kids while he screwed my wife? Dean's face went crimson. You bastard. You sabotaged my warehouse. I fixed a problem, Rick said coldly. Just like I fix everything else. Dean lunged, swinging clumsily for Rick's head. But Rick had worked with his hands all his life, and Dean's only calluses came from signing checks. The fight lasted seconds. Rick ducked, drove a fist into Dean's solar plexus, and slammed him against the concrete wall. You want to fight me? Rick hissed in his ear. You want my wife, my kids, my money, my business. Now you want to fight too? He spun Dean and struck him across the face with the wrench. Not enough to cripple him, but enough to break his nose and leave blood soaking his designer shirt. Dean crumpled, whimpering. Please don't finish me. Rick stared down at him. Finish you?
No.
I want you alive, alive long enough to feel what it's like to lose everything. He turned to Kara, who was pressed against the wall, terrified. Your turn. Rick, think of the boys. Think of our family. Family? Rick activated another screen. Legal documents appeared, Kara's plans to vanish with Dean, the boys, and every dollar. According to these papers, there is no family, Rick said. They're not your sons. Kara shrieked. They never were. You were just the fool footing the bill, while I built a real life. The words poisoned the air. Rick nodded slowly, as if solving an equation. There it is. The truth.
At last.
He took Dean's phone and opened Kara's messages. You know what's great about technology? Nothing ever really disappears. Through the speaker, Kara's voice mocked. Rick's such a loser. Soon I'll have his house, his money, his kids, and he'll rot in some studio apartment paying me alimony for life. Dean looked at her in disbelief. You said you loved me. I loved what you could give me, Kara sneered. Just like I used Rick. That's called being smart. Rick dropped a thick folder onto the table. Speaking of smart, here's how careful I've been. Inside were divorce papers, evidence of Kara's theft, proof of Dean's tax crimes, records of their fraudulent schemes. Revenge isn't about blood, Rick said evenly. It's about consequences, real, devastating consequences. He handed each their copies. Kara, you're facing charges for fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Dean, you've got tax evasion and business fraud on your plate. Kara's hands trembled. You can't do this. I'm their mother. Those kids deserve better than a liar, Rick said softly. And since you tricked me into raising children that weren't mine, the law says you'll pay me back every penny. Dean staggered up, clutching his broken nose. Rick, let's deal. I'll pay you anything. What I want, Rick said, is for you both to understand loss. He pressed a button. Every screen in the factory began live-streaming their confessions, their betrayals, their corruption, to friends, family, co-workers. Kara's phone lit up with calls and texts as her reputation crumbled in real time. You're destroying us, she whispered. No, Rick replied. You destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure the world sees it. At the door, Rick paused. Oh, and Dean? Your insurance won't cover the warehouse. Criminal activity voids your policy. You'll be bankrupt by Christmas. Rick, wait. Kara pleaded. Don't say my name. He cut her off.
Don't call me.
Don't come home. Your lawyer can talk to mine. What about the boys? She begged. Rick's fury flickered, exposing pain. They'll be fine. They'll have a father who loves them, not a sperm donor who sees them as paychecks. And a mother, well, they'll need therapy for having you. Rick left them there, bleeding, ruined, and humiliated, while the live stream continued to broadcast their downfall. 6 months later, in family court, Rick listened as the judge finalized custody. Kara was found guilty of paternity fraud, ordered to repay 13 years of child support, stripped of her license, her home, and her reputation. Dean's bankruptcy was complete, the IRS had seized his assets, and federal charges loomed.
Spring.
At Tommy's Little League game, Rick cheered as his son, because in every way that mattered, Tommy was his son, hit a double. Kara appeared at the bleachers, gaunt and broken. Rick, please can we talk? He didn't look at her. There's nothing left to say. The boys miss me. They're in therapy. They're doing fine. You made choices. Finally, he turned to her. Actions have consequences. You taught me that. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm not, he replied. On the field, Tommy rounded second. Rick rose, shouting encouragement. Kara wept quietly and walked away, never to approach him again. That night, after tucking the boys into bed, Jake asked sleepily, Dad, are you happy now? Rick smiled, the first real smile in years. Yeah, buddy, I'm happy. Down in his workshop, Rick slid the Polaroid, the photo that started everything, into a shredder. Her smug face disappeared into teeth of steel. Outside, the neighborhood was calm. His truck sat beside a newer one, bought with Kara's restitution. Rick Dalton had learned something vital about consequences. They always arrive. Sometimes slowly, but when they do, they're worth the wait. Some mechanics fix machines. Rick fixed lives. He'd done both.